Okay, you've got a minute. See what you can do. Bonus points if you can say the word that starts with E there. I'm not joking. It's not a joke. Okay, we'll have an oral exam. You have to pronounce all the words. Say it wrong. Ouch. Oh, like spell it. No, we can spell it and pronunciation.
This is your last class teaching.
It is. It's a lot of laughs today. Last class before your test, last class before your math, last class me. I'll see you later.
Stop now.
Okay, 10 more seconds. Okay, anyone want to try to pronounce the E word? Close. Echinodea, yes, Alex, I'm assuming you're there. Okay, what do echinozoans have in common?
They molt.
They molt. They have an exoskeleton that they have to molt. It doesn't grow with them, so they have to shed it as they are growing. We talked about two phyla in this clade, and we're going to finish talking about the second one today. What are the two phyla that we talked about that are in this clade? Nematode or nematoda, and arthropods, which we're going to finish talking about today. So what are three characteristics of arthropods? Speaking of arthropods, what are three characteristics of arthropods? Exoskeleton, body segmentation, I heard somebody say, and jointed appendages. There's other things, but those are kind of the defining characteristics. And then within the arthropods, give a characteristic of the chelicerates. 6 pairs of appendages. One of them is chelicerae, which are for pinching or their fangs. One of them are the pedipalps, and the rest of them are walking legs. This is a picture. Dr. Thayer mentioned on Wednesday that there is a millipede with 1,000 legs, and I didn't know that, so I looked it up. This is called the pale millipede. It's about 3 centimeters long and lives in the soil in Australia, like 10 meters down. It has 1,036 legs in 3 centimeters. I think that's pretty impressive. Why can I still not master changing the slide? There we go. Oh, we didn't talk about examples of chelicerates. Sorry. I got a little excited there. Spiders, mites, ticks, horseshoe crabs, scorpions, all of those are chelicerates. I did list a couple other things about the chelicerates. Cephalothorax, they have simple eyes and they have no antenna, which makes them kind of unique. Those are other defining characteristics. Okay, so we talked on Wednesday. We started arthropods. We talked about the chelicerates. We talked about the myropods, which are the millipedes and the centipedes. And we talked about pancrustaceans, the subphylum Crustacea. And we said, remember, pancrustation is kind of a new development in our taxonomy. So we're talking about the second subphylum of pancrustacea today, which are Hexapoda. Hexa means what? Poda. So these are your insects, the hexapods. This is the most numerous, they're the most species in this clade of any one that we know of. And what makes a hexapod a hexapod? They have 6 feet. Okay, we know that. They have a lot of internal organs. So this is a grasshopper that has been chopped in half. We used to dissect grasshoppers in lab, but we found that the ones that we got tended to be just mush on the inside. So we stopped dissecting them because the pictures are better. And they smelled, it was kind of gross, honestly. So they have a GI tract. You can see they have mouth parts. They have a GI tract going through. Whoops, my line went the wrong way. They have a mouth and an anus, a tube within a tube. So they eat food and they digest it. They send it through their body. So how do they transport nutrients? You can see here, they do have a heart. That's part of their open circulatory system. Who else has an open circulatory system? Mollusks have an open circulatory system. So they have a heart to move fluid throughout their body. That fluid, because it's not contained in vessels, is called hemolymph. So they digest nutrients and then move it through their body through the hemolymph, diffusion through the hemolymph, and the heart moving it through. For waste removal, I think we already mentioned this earlier. They have these Malpighian tubes to get rid of their nitrogenous waste, helping to maintain balance, osmotic balance, like we talked about in lab this week. Removing nitrogenous waste helps to maintain osmotic balance. So that's actually a branch of their digestive system. So they don't have anything like nephridium or metanephridium, that kind of thing. It's just a branch off their digestive system to help them get rid of nitrogenous waste. For gas exchange, they have tracheal tubes, a tracheal tube system. So they're openings to the outside through their exoskeleton, which gases come in through and are moved through this tracheal tube system in their body. So we talked about how they get nutrients and spread it through their body. We talked about gas exchange. We talked about getting rid of waste. Obviously they can move because they have 6 legs. They're modal. And what's the last thing we need to talk about? Reproduction. Reproduction in this subphylum is sexual reproduction with separate sexes. And it's usually internal fertilization. With a clade that has so many species, there's always exceptions, but usually internal fertilization. So those are our 5 questions. You'll notice in the picture, something else that makes hexapods unique. What do they have? What's it doing? They can fly. They have wings. So the wings for them are actually an extension of their cuticle, an extension of their exoskeleton. They're not actual true appendages. So like a flying vertebrate, a bat that flies, they have true appendages to fly. These aren't considered to be true appendages. They're located on the thorax. Oh, stop. Oh my gosh, sorry. Someday I'm going to master this. And it'll be too late. I know, so it's too late. My mastery level, I've achieved too late, and that I haven't achieved it yet. So their wings are on the thorax. This doesn't sacrifice any of their walking legs. They're on top. And you can see, obviously, the ladybug. They're sometimes called ladybirds too. Ladybird beetles. It's just another name. That's why we have scientific names. There's lots of different species of them too. You can see they actually have two sets. Like they have their wings come out from underneath their upper. That's actually a covering. It's not actually wings. And then the thing below is called a spiny devil katydid. It's a kind of cricket, and it does look a little intimidating. It's small. You could take it. I honestly don't know. I would have to look that up. So that within the subphylum Hexapoda, there are 30 orders. We are not going to talk about 30 orders. You can be glad we don't have time to talk about 30 orders. Another unique characteristic of the hexapods is they undergo metamorphosis. And there are two kinds of metamorphosis. What you're seeing in this picture is complete metamorphosis, but there's also incomplete, and we'll talk about the difference. So most insects undergo metamorphosis. Let's talk about incomplete first. So incomplete metamorphosis is not nearly as exciting. Incomplete metamorphosis, the larvae look like the adults. I don't know why I'm trying to write small. It never works. So they just look like small adults. Their body proportions are a little bit different, and they don't have any wings. So their body is proportionally different. They don't have any wings, but otherwise you might recognize it as this is a larval form of a cricket or something like that. So two orders that go through incomplete metamorphosis, and I needed like a whole nother slide to write out these names. I'm going to write them up here. It is an I. I doubted myself. That should be an I. The Hemiptera, these are the true bugs. These are things like stink bugs, bed bugs. These are not the pretty bugs, the fun bugs, assassin bugs. Those are kind of fun. But the Hemiptera go through incomplete metamorphosis, so I'll give them an I. And the other order is the Orthoptera. Orthoptera. See, we're not having a spelling bee for your test because I can't spell them either. So Orthoptera, those are grasshoppers, crickets, herbivorous jumping insects. Both of those go through incomplete metamorphosis. So their little larvae look like adults, except they don't have wings and their proportions are a little different. But as I said, that's not necessarily the exciting part. People get much more excited about complete metamorphosis, which is why we have pictures of that one. Complete metamorphosis, the larval stage is totally different. It looks different. Their diet is often different. And then it changes into something completely different looking. So you're probably familiar with, I thought about bringing the Very Hungry Caterpillar to read to you, but you're probably familiar with the Very Hungry Caterpillar. I hope if you have not, you should go to the library and check it out. The idea of we have a caterpillar larva and we end up with a butterfly at the end. This is anyone know what kind this is? This is a monarch. So monarch butterflies are pretty cool. Every summer we hatch them at our house. So I got a little excited about monarch butterflies, so I'm going to tell you a lot more about them. So they start as an egg, which is not on here, but the egg is tiny. As if that's to scale. It's tiny. So an adult female monarch butterfly can lay about 300 eggs or so in a 2-week period. After that, they do. But they can lay 300 eggs. Again, variations in environment and temperature and conditions can affect that, but 300 eggs or so in 2 weeks. The egg is around for 4 to 6 days. Only about 2% of these survive to adulthood. So if a female lays 300 eggs, how many of them might become adults? 6. So the survival rate is not great, which is why when we find the eggs, we bring them to our house and take care of them. What do they lay their eggs on? Milkweed, only milkweed. Why do they choose milkweed? Milkweed is actually poisonous to a lot of organisms. So there's not a lot of competition for milkweed as a food source. So if a monarch can exclusively eat milkweed, it guarantees a better food source than if something else. It is not the only thing that eats milkweed, but that's why they lay their eggs on milkweed. So 4 to 6 days later, a little tiny baby caterpillar hatches. And when I say tiny, I mean tiny, like a grain of rice tiny. You wouldn't notice it if you weren't looking for it tiny. So for 10 to 14 days, there's a caterpillar that grows from a grain of rice to about 2 3/4 inches long. Huge. It's amazing. 10 to 14 days. They just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. What are they eating? Only milkweed. During that time, they shed 5 times. The 5th shed changes it from a larva to a pupa. So it sheds, it actually goes up and finds something to attach to, and it actually stays in this J shape for about a day before it does the 5th shed, and then becomes the pupa. And the pupa changes to this kind of really pretty green, and you don't see it really well in this picture, but there's actually a gold ring around the top. And that's why they're called monarch caterpillars and butterflies, because of that gold ring that forms on the pupa. This is just trivia, sorry. So the larval phase in a complete metamorphosis for a caterpillar and everything else that's going through complete metamorphosis is specialized for eating and growing. That's its job, is just to eat and grow and eat and grow and eat and grow. And during the pupa phase, they're not eating, they're not doing anything, they're sessile at that point, and they're just going through a crazy transformation. Okay, so a caterpillar is specialized to eat milkweed. A butterfly has a long proboscis to suck nectar. So the feeding structures are changing. The body type is obviously totally changing. There's all kinds of crazy things you can read about what goes on inside a cocoon or pupa. It's a cocoon if it's a moth, it's a pupa if it's a caterpillar. They change the number of legs that they have, all kinds of stuff is going on. The adult is specialized for dispersal and reproduction. So the adult is there to reproduce and generally doesn't live a long time. So anything that hatches in the summer, those adults only last about 3 weeks. But what's really cool about monarchs is they also migrate. So they winter in Mexico, which doesn't sound like a bad idea all the time. But the ones that hatch in late August through October don't live 3 weeks. They migrate. So when they hatch during that time, their gene expression is different at that time of year. So they don't have mature reproductive organs, so they can't reproduce. They're immature, they're sexually immature. And they go to Mexico, they spend the winter in Mexico, and then they start migrating back. And in about February, they hit Texas, and they hit sexual maturity, and they reproduce and die, and they reproduce, and then they die. Those adults die in Texas, and then they keep migrating back up north. So most of them, like in the summer and the spring, are only 3 weeks as adults, but there's this one phase that if you're born in late August to October, you live for months and months and months. Again, we don't really understand it, but the gene expression is different in those organisms in terms of their sexual organs and their maturity, and they live longer. And I think it's wild. So metamorphosis, complete metamorphosis happens with a lot of other insects, not just caterpillars to butterflies, but that's perhaps the most dramatic. We'll see if my video will work. It's a short video. Oh no, it's not working. Again, this is, I don't get this. Yes, I want to do the video. No. Why? Does anyone have an answer for this? Why? Why does it do this to me? It works in one place and doesn't in the other. No, I don't want to do that. Okay, here we go. Yes, this has nothing to do with it. But there's upbeat music playing. You can't hear it. But there's upbeat music. I don't know why there's no talking either. I don't know. It must be. Yep. Who did that to me? So that's the 5th shed into the pupa. The pupa is 9 to 14 days. I don't know if I said that. And right before it hatches, it goes clear so you can see the adult. And after it hatches, you can see its body's really long and its wings are kind of compressed. So it actually will hang out for a little while, and you can see it like pumping the hemolymph through its body to pump it through the veins in its wings to expand its wings and dry out, and then it flies away. I can't see if this is a girl or a boy. It's got the black spots there, so I think it's a boy, if I remember right. So we talked, obviously, we know that butterflies go through this. So the order for butterflies and moths is Lepidoptera. So Lepidoptera go through complete metamorphosis. Hymenoptera, those are bees, wasps, and ants. Those are social insects. I could go on about those for hours too, but I won't. Diptera, which are flies. If you've ever hatched fruit flies, you've seen the little maggots that turn into fruit flies. It's a complete metamorphosis process, not as pretty as the butterfly. And beetles, Coleoptera. Coleoptera also go through a complete metamorphosis. If you've ever kept mealworms long enough, if you have a reptile or something that you feed mealworms and you keep them long enough, they turn into dark-winged beetles. It's a complete metamorphosis process too. Okay, so that's Hexapoda in a 10-minute thing. The last phylum that we're going to talk about as in our introduction to invertebrates are part of the clade Deuterostomia. Deuterostome meaning what? Deutero is second, stome is mouth. So in the development process, the blastopore becomes an anus, and then they develop a mouth. So the mouth is second. So most of what we've been talking about before this, if it goes through this process, if it's triploblastic, is a protostome, where the blastopore becomes the mouth. In this case, the blastopore becomes the anus. So the deuterostomes, in terms of invertebrates, there are the echinoderms, which is what we're going to talk about now. You'll notice that chordates are there. That's your next chapter. So chapter 34 is going to get you into the hemichordates and the chordates. Hemichordates, if you want to talk about a whole collection of weird things, we'll talk about hemichordates. There's a whole collection of weird things there. And then chordates. Chordates is not exactly the same as vertebrates, which you'll learn about in the next chapter. So we're going to do the last phylum, which are the Echinodermata. And you'll notice that we're saying that they're the most closely related to chordates. So of the invertebrates, that's saying that we as chordates are most closely related to the echinoderms. Maybe you don't feel like a sea star, but you're most closely related to a sea star. Okay, echino. How about derm? What does derm mean? Skin and echino, anyone? Spiny. So echinoderms have spiny skin for the most part. You know how we like to have exceptions. And we'll talk about an exception to that. But so echinoderms are known for having spiny skin. We talked about that they're deuterostomes. This is the first clade that we're talking about that has an endoskeleton. Okay, we've talked about exoskeletons. This is the first clade that has an endoskeleton, not skeleton like bones, but underneath an epidermis, they have a layer of calcium plates, calcaneus plates. Calcaneus. And that's covered by the epidermis, which is generally spiny. What's makes this phylum seem maybe a little more primitive is there's no cephalization. So there's no head. They do have some concentration of nerves. They have a nerve ring, but not like a head brain kind of thing. In this phylum, the larvae have bilateral symmetry, but the adults have what we call modified radial. They don't have perfect radial symmetry because some things are off center and a lot of them are 5 sections, which makes it hard to split it in half evenly. So the larvae are bilateral, but the adults are modified radial. Another unique characteristic of this phylum is that they have a water vascular system. So you can see in this starfish, in this bottom leg, it's covered up in some other ones. This is part of the water vascular system. And we'll talk about these in a second. The water vascular system is used for motion, so movement, so locomotion. And for feeding. So it's a system of hydraulic canals that they use to be able to move around and feed. So let's actually look at these parts. I'm gonna move this down here, move this over there. So zooming in on this, so water comes in through this structure. This is called the Madreporite, or Madreporite, some people say. And I am gonna move the slide if I'm not careful. So water comes in and out through that, almost like a valve. That's external. So you can see it's in that black box there. And then we're zooming in. So water is brought in to this structure, which is the ring canal, and then moves out through the radial canal. And we'll be looking at sea stars in lab. So you'll see some of this live in a dead organism. So when it moves out to the ring canals, then it moves into the radial canal, sorry. The ampulla, which are these bulbs that can fill with fluid and then squeeze. And when they squeeze, they push out this structure, which is called the tube foot. And that kind of acts like a suction cup, but it's not just like a physical suction cup. It actually secretes chemicals, adhesive chemicals that allow it to attach to something. So it kind of extends the tube foot out, grips onto a surface using the adhesive chemicals, then releases the tube foot, sucks it back in, moves over, extends it back out and grips, and it actually leaves like little footprints of adhesive chemicals. So it has adhesive chemicals it secretes and then unadhesive chemicals that it secretes as it's walking around. Deadhesive, I think, is the correct word, not unadhesive. So that's a unique characteristic of the echinoderms. You'll notice also on this surface up here, these little purple little spikes are the gills. So it uses gills for gas exchange. These are all aquatic organisms. And to eat, it's kind of cool. It actually everts its stomach, so it grasps something using the tube feet. It can hold on to something. They often eat mollusks. Some of them eat other species of echinoderms. So they grasp onto it and they're really strong. They can actually pull apart mollusks. And then they just kind of pop their stomach out and swallow something up. And they actually start the digestive process outside the body. So once it's liquefied, then they can bring their stomach in. So they can eat things that are bigger than them because they're doing like an external digestion. Or at least starting digestion externally. So they avert their stomach through their mouth and release enzymes to start digestion, and then they bring their stomach back in through their mouth. This is not an appealing method of eating to me. I don't want to avert my stomach out my mouth. So what else do we need to talk about? Eating, we talked about. Reproduction. So it's sexual reproduction. With external fertilization. A lot of them just, that's an F. That's not making it better. A lot of them just release the gametes into the water and fertilization happens outside the body and the larvae develop outside the body. There's no parental care kind of thing. It's just a mass fertilization event. In a lot of cases, a lot of them do it at the same time. It's timed so that females are releasing eggs and males are releasing sperm so that lots of babies can happen. I think I need to erase everything on this now. So there's there's 5 living clades within this. We're going to talk about 4 of them. So the Asteroidea, these are the sea stars. And there's another picture. No, I want the picture. There we go. So sea stars, the classic, what we call starfish, what we shouldn't, because they're not fish. And then these are called sea daisies. They're also part of the Asteroidea. They're less than a centimeter big. And they're in 5 parts. I don't know if you can see it. They have one, like they don't look like they have 5, they don't have 5 arms, but they have 5 sections. So they still have that 5-part symmetry of kinds. The other thing that we didn't talk about with these that we should have talked about, they have the ability to regenerate arms. So they can cut off an arm or shed an arm in a stressful situation and regrow it. And that's been a source of a lot of study. There's a lot of study been trying to figure out how these are close to us relationally. How are they able to regenerate? Can we figure out a way to do that? We're not even close to that yet, but can we figure out a way to regenerate limbs? That'd be great. They have a central nerve ring, which we can't really see in here. So they don't have cephalization, but they do have a central nerve ring. And again, we'll look at these a lot more in lab next week or the week after. I think it's next week. The Opheariodia. These are the brittle stars. They look kind of like sea stars, but they have a small central disc and then long arms. There's my artistic ability. I can draw a brittle star. Then Echinodea are the sea urchins and sand dollars. Yes, sand dollars are alive. You probably just didn't see it when it was alive. When they're alive, they're kind of covered with brown legs, spines is probably a better way to say that. These guys don't have arms, but they do have tube feet. And again, they're arranged in sections of 5. If you've ever seen the sea dollar, the sand dollar, even on the top, you see the little star-shaped decoration, isn't the right word, but marking. And sea urchins have 5 like sections of tube feet, which again, we don't really see because we see them dead. We just see them with the spines. When they're alive, they actually have control over those spines. They can use those spines for movement.
Does that say 2 feet?
It does. It says 2 feet, no arms. I promise. We will look at this in lab as well, but they have a really interesting mouth feeding structure called Aristotle's lantern, which is actually a pretty powerful eating tool. And it's, again, we'll look at this in lab next week or the week after, I can't remember. I'm just gonna assume this video link is not gonna work, right? I guess because we're learning about sea creatures, we should eat seafood. There we go.
Ocean currents carry a constant supply of nutrients up from the depths to the surface layers. These upwellings fertilize forests of giant kelp that thrive in the summer sunshine. The algal towers are as high as a 3-story house, and they can grow by ½ a meter a day. Life in the kelp is as full of drama as in any other forest, but the cost is less familiar. An army of sea urchins is mounting an attack. The urchin plague strikes at the kelp's holdfasts, their crucial attachments to the rock. Holdfasts are extremely tough, but each urchin has 5 teeth, which are self-sharpening and are replaced every few months. Urchins fell vast areas of kelp forest, creating clearings known as urchin barrens. Yet, barrens is a poor description. Millions of invertebrates invade the seabed. The most fearsome predator here is a giant. A sunflower starfish is a meter across, with an appetite for brittle stars. uses its feet to taste for prey. When its actions are speeded up, it becomes clear that the predator's fondness for the brittle stars is almost matched by the brittle star's ability to get out of the way. Sand dollars, flat sea urchins, cluster together as a defense. But it doesn't seem to work against the sunflower starfish. The predator extrudes its stomach and wraps it around its victims, liquefying their soft parts. Nothing is left except their white skeletons.
Where are my pictures now? Ooh, stop. No. There we go. Okay, sorry. And then the last clade that we're talking about in this chapter is the Opheariodia. These. Nope. Do I have to pick a color really? Well, I'll just do it. Okay. These are the sea cucumbers. That's not even cucumber, is it? No. Sea cucumbers. So sea cucumbers are echinoderms, but they're a little bit unique. They have a reduced skeleton. So we talked about the endoskeleton. They have a really small endoskeleton. They don't have spines. So the whole spiny skin thing doesn't really work for them. But they do still have 2 feet in 5 rows. But they have a really elongated body, which is why we call them sea cucumbers. We are going to dissect sea cucumbers in lab next week. Someone pointed out then we should call them sea pickles because they have been preserved for us. So we'll dissect sea pickles. And we have another video of them, sorry. And then we're going to talk about the test, and then you're going to be done. This is probably going to be really loud.
These animals may look like boring lumps, but sea cucumbers have all sorts of surprises. This hairy sea cucumber takes several hours to burrow into the sand. Its body now safely hidden, it's time to eat. It unfurls its feathery tentacles. Any microscopic morsel it finds gets pulled down into its mouth. A miniature forest of cukes filter the water clean of organic debris. But at the first sign of trouble, the forest vanishes to feed another time. It knows no fear, possibly because it has no brain. Instead, a nerve ring around its mouth tells it when to move, when to fight, and when to eat. In the animal kingdom, there's no emergency rooms, band-aids, or kisses from mommy. Fighting takes guts. For this cute, that's no metaphor. A fish nips in its backside, the wrong side. It expels its guts out of its very own ring of fire. Their filaments are sticky and toxic. If the fish gets caught, it might die. The fish wants no part of this fight, or this surprisingly resourceful lump.
Closing that. Okay, so that's echinoderms. Those are brittle stars. There's a sea urchin. There's a sea cucumber. Okay, so your test on Monday has 19 multiple choice questions, some matching questions, and some short answer and diagram questions. So I thought we could maybe talk about some practice questions and practice doing a few in the last 3 minutes that we have. So take a minute and answer number one and keep going. If you finish number one, I'm going to give you 30 seconds or so. These are not test questions that are on your actual test. I don't think. And I will post these on Moodle too. I'll post the PowerPoint, updated PowerPoint on Moodle, so these will be on Moodle, so don't try to frantically write them down. So the first one's coming from chapter 31. So when I take a test, and this is not, again, you don't have to do it like me, but when I take a test, I always write on the test. Some of you do and some of you don't. So I like to think about what words are important. So I'm talking about mycorrhizae here. What do mycorrhizae do for plants? What do I know without even reading the question? They help get what? Nutrients for the plant. So I'm probably thinking we're talking about why fungi are better than plants at getting nutrition from the soil. So I'm going to look at my answers and I'm going to say, are they bigger than plant roots for a C? We looked at them under the microscope. They weren't bigger, right? So it's probably not C. Do they grow in the direction of food? They don't really have that sensing capability. So I'm probably down to A and D. So cross out the ones you know are not right, and then think about A versus D. Okay, A says hyphae have a smaller surface area to volume ratio than do the hairs on a plant root. So we talked some about surface area to volume ratio. Is a smaller surface area to volume ratio good or bad? Bad. We want more surface area to volume. So this is probably not right because we're talking about a smaller one, and smaller is not good for getting nutrients. Is it true that fungi secrete extracellular enzymes that can break down large molecules? Yeah, that's how they get nutrition. So that's going to be my answer. And I'm going to write it in the blank. Okay, number two. What do animals ranging from corals to monkeys have in common? So we're talking about all animals here because we're starting with very simple, going to very complex. So this is chapter 32. We talked about animal diversity. So do they have the number of embryonic tissue layers? Do all of them have the same number of embryonic tissue layers? No, because we know they can be what? Triploblastic or diploblastic. So it's not that one. Presence of Hox genes. What are the Hox genes? They help regulate gene expression during the development process. Do all animals have those? We talked about homeoboxes, and some have homeoboxes, but everybody does have a Hox gene. Okay, so all the animals have a Hox gene. They don't all have a mouth and an anus because some of them have that only one opening. And we know some of them are asymmetric, so they don't have body symmetry. Oh, 3 is up there twice. Let's not do that one again. Number 4, the presence of a lophophore. What is a lophophore? The tentacles, the ciliated crown of ciliated tentacles. So it's ciliated tentacles. Would suggest that the species A has an exoskeleton. Do ciliated that not related? Is a filter feeder. using its cilia to do what? Get food, so that's a possibility. Is modal? Cilia sometimes make things move, but so I wouldn't necessarily cross that one out already. It grows by shedding its external covering, not related to the local force. So I'd be down to these two initially. And then we talked about the ciliated tentacles as being a feeding mechanism, so we're gonna go with B. Apparently I liked B. And then last one, which of the following cells or structures are associated with asexual reproduction? Okay, so we know we're talking about asexual reproduction. Ascospores, sexual or asexual? Sexual. Basidiospores, sexual or asexual? Sexual. Conidiophores? Some people are saying maybe they don't know, but what about zygospores? Definitely sexual, so it has to be conidiophores. Okay. The end of your chapters has practice questions and a lot of helpful charts and stuff. So make sure you're using your book to study from. And be here Monday.